welcome to today. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Anne McCusker. I am the coordinator for the UK Healthy Cities and Towns Network. Belfast Healthy Cities has the secretariat for the network. So this fantastic webinar today is in partnership with Groundswell Consortium, Queen's University, Belfast Healthy Cities, and the UK Healthy Cities and Towns Network. So you're very welcome. Green in the Grey, Temporary and Tactical Urbanism for Healthier Cities. So we'd be delighted with the range of speakers we have today. As you just heard, the webinar is being recorded and that will be shared with you next week. But please share it with colleagues, share on LinkedIn or your social media, any of the key messages from today, anything that you find particularly inspiring, and of course the recording when it becomes available. It'll be emailed directly to you, a link, and we're happy to follow up with any questions or queries that you have. So you will be able to submit your questions. There will be a question and answer session at the end after all three speakers have presented. And we really want you to get the most out of this event. So please interact with us, ask your questions, try to learn more, whatever it is you're hoping to get out of today. So to our speakers, you're very welcome. John Hayes from Cork City Council, Gillian Dick from Glasgow City Council, and Professor Mark Nieuwenhuizen from IS Global Barcelona. We will hear a thumbs up from Mark. I was saying, Mark, please let me know that your surname pronunciation. So I think I've done a good job there. So this is the second in the webinar series, Common Ground, Co-Creating Healthy Urban Environments. The third and final event is on the 19th of March. So the QR code is there to register. It will also be shared at the end of this event in the chat. So don't worry about panicking about registering now. I'll share this picture and the link later on. But for today, what we're going to explore is pop-up parks, parklets, temporary re-greening initiatives, things that shape our city, bring in some green to our grey spaces. How do we make them more attractive? How do we encourage people to be active in terms of their travel options and their routes, but also that wider impact around social cohesion, active travel, and the economy, and ultimately our physical and mental health. And we go back to these spaces that were so important during COVID-19, and how do we continue that use of our urban spaces and try things and test them as we go along. So our first speaker, Mark, I'll invite you just to get your presentation ready. You're very welcome. Professor Mark Nieuwenhuizen is the Director of Urban Planning, Environment and Health Initiatives and Climate, Air Pollution and Nature at the Urban Health Research Programme in IS Global Barcelona. A world-leading expert in environmental exposure assessment, epidemiology and health impact assessment, and a real experience in editing over 8 books, 600 papers published, so a wealth of information. And an invitation to anyone that would like to attend the Urban Transitions Conference near Barcelona in November of this year. Mark was telling it to us earlier. It's the winter sun, a walkable city, and a very interesting conference. So we're delighted to have you with us today, Mark. Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anne. Yes, I mean, 10 till the 12th of November in Sitges, Barcelona, Urban Transitions, a wonderful place to be. Lots of sun around that time of the year and you still can swim. You should be there. I'll put it in the chat later. So I'll be talking a little bit also from my perspective, not only tactical urbanism there, but also a bit more permanent, how we get there. And I just want to remind you that where I come from, I look more at the kind of holistic system-based approach where I see a clear connection between urban design, people's behavior, how they use the public space, pathways of pollution and lifestyles like air pollution, temperature, etc., stress, social contact, physical activity, and then morbidity and mortality. So, most of the time I say for health is made on the left side of the picture, and me as a public health person, I deal with more on the right side when we get to disease or mortality, and we're hoping to prevent that. And one way of doing it is, of course, greening our environment, because we know that's very important for health, but also encouraging active transportation. Here you can see some of the benefits of green infrastructure. What we all know, it encourages more physical activity. I think it's known for this, but at the same time, we also know that it reduces air pollution and noise, it reduces the risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer. Also, it improves people's mental health and increase life satisfaction, and also memory and attention. Finally, also what is important in time of climate crisis, it reduces the urban heat island effects as well. So there are many reasons, health reasons, to actually increase greening. There are a number of papers also looking at the different pathways of how green space affects health and well-being. I won't go into this, but it comes down also there, that it's more is in a way important. Unfortunately, what we see in the world is that the green space in our cities is decreasing, while at the same time we also see heat increasing in our cities. And Europe is no exception in this way. Well, we should have the reverse. We should have more green space and reducing the heat effects. A few years ago, we did a study in nearly 1,000 European cities, I think including Belfast. There, what we found that 60% of people didn't have access to sufficient green space. The WHO, the World Health Organization, says that people should be living within 300 meters of a green space of at least 1 hectare, and we found 60% of the population didn't do this. We estimated that there are 43,000 premature deaths each year because of the lack of green space in our cities. But of course, it's also not about green space. These kind of things go together. At the same time, you've got heat, you got noise, you got extreme heat. That's what also we only estimated, for example, that there are 200,000 deaths because of air pollution in the cities. And a bit of greening actually can reduce air pollution levels as well. So it's time to green our cities. Unfortunately, many cities are doing this, and have it in their policies. And, when you think about green space there, you think about this wonderful park, but of course, we know that's not always possible to put a new park in there. Many cities are fortunate to have a very nice parks where you actually can relax. And in just looking at the picture, you think I would love to be there and walk around a little bit or sit. Now, what we've seen also in many cities is what I call the so-called new innovative urban models. This kind of more tactical urbanism, partly tactical urbanism, partly more kind of structural, that are trying to address the environmental problems that we have, and also lifestyle problems that we have in our cities. We see, for example, in London, the low traffic neighborhoods, where you cut off some streets where you don't let through traffic. And put something else. You can put some plants and green there as well. It's a bit minor. What kind of has a lot of interest is the 50-minute city. The idea that all your destinations, work, cultural, shopping, etc., should be within 50 minutes of your home. It doesn't pay specific interest, attention to do green, but it's also kind of implicit in there that also should be some greening. Or you have, for example, car-free neighborhoods. Here I've got an example, is in Vauban in Freiburg, with a whole car-free neighborhood where it also gives a lot of space to green, and also at the same time there's sustainable housing, so you get a very nice neighborhood, a very livable neighborhood. Unfortunately, I mean, it's so popular that it's also a bit too expensive for this. Now, what I would like to focus on, though, is what we also see in Barcelona, my own city here, is the superblock model. What we have on the left side, on the top right, on the left side of the picture, you see the kind of grid system of traffic. What we have a very high density of traffic in the city, with about 400,000 cars entering the city that take up a lot of our public space. And so a few years ago, there was this initiative to reclaim our public space and use it more for greening and also for active transportation. So the superblock model you see on the right side is in a block of 9, cutting 4 junctions, and only allow active transportation within there, the cars going around it, and also increasing more green. This was initially introduced in a few little places as a more tactical urbanism, trying and making it actually more permanent later. Initially, 502 superblocks were planned within Barcelona. On the bottom right, you can see Sant Antoni. On the left side of the picture, what was it before, and on the right side, what was after. I mean, so you can see no cars, a bit more green. And we did a modeling exercise where we estimated that you could prevent 502 with the 502 superblocks, you could prevent almost 700 premature deaths each year in Barcelona if you would implement all the superblocks. Half of them were due to the reduction in air pollution. We have very high nitrogen dioxide levels, also reduction of noise and heat, but also because of the increase in green space, could prevent 60 deaths per year. Furthermore, we estimated some increase, a reduction of premature mortality because of the increase in physical activity, but I was probably underestimated that for what it was. Now, unfortunately, this 502 superblocks were never implemented. What we actually got was a more kind of superblock light model called the Green Corridors, Ejes Verdes, where right in the middle of the city, in the Eixample area, not 1 out of 2 streets were pacified, but 1 out of 3 streets were pacified. So on the top and right corner, you see a street what was before, and then on the bottom, you see what the street looked actually after. I mean, so the asphalt was taken out, put in more green space, and only active transportation allowed. We did some work on this, also a health impact assessment in this case, because before and after is a bit more difficult. And we estimated that mental health problems, or different indicators of mental health problems, like self-perceived mental health, visits to mental health professionals, and use of antidepressants and tranquilizers, could be reduced by about between 8 and 14% because of the extra green space that came into this particular area. Would provide a saving of around 45 million per year. Now, as what I said, one of the main things, or one of the aspects as well, it's with the climate crisis, with the warming, we know there is often already an urban heat island effect in our cities, where the city center is 4 or 5 degrees warmer. Because of the retention of heat during the night, because from asphalt and concrete. And that's also causing quite a lot of deaths and other diseases. We, in a study of 100 cities, we estimated that 4% of summer mortality in those cities, in these European cities, were attributable to urban heat island effects. And that if we could increase tree cover from currently 15% to 30%, we could reduce the average temperature in the urban environments by about 1.3 degree, and prevent about 1/3 of these premature deaths that were attributable to the urban heat island effects. So increasing your green space really could prevent mortality, and of course also related disease. I think one aspirational number, figure, or rule that got a lot of notion is the 330-300 green space rule, originally proposed by Cecil Konijnendijk, who suggested that you need to be able to see 3 trees from your window, live in an area of 30% green cover, and within 300 meters of a nearest park. To have many health benefits. We tested this rule in Barcelona. Unfortunately, we found that only 6% of people were achieving this rule because Barcelona is a very compact city with not much space for green space, but that people achieving this rule had a real strong reduction of a number of mental health indicators, and so it was really beneficial for them. Finally, it's how we treat public space. I think I was mentioning at the beginning. I mean, a lot of our public space, our roads and parking is actually used by cars, while we should be able to use the space in a much better way, for example, by putting green space or by promoting active transportation, for example, cycling. We know that 50% of our trips are shorter than 5 kilometers and could be easily replaced by cycling. There are some really good examples of cities that have been very successful, like Utrecht in the Netherlands, where up to 80% of trips nowadays are actually by bicycle. And, you know, they started initially also with a fairly low level 30, 40 years ago, but it provides a much nicer environment. But to be able to get people to cycle and to be active, you need to have what I believe safe cycling infrastructure, and that's still lacking in quite a few cities. This is on the top left. This is a study we did where we looked at 167 cities, looked at the relationship between availability of safe cycling infrastructure, cycling kilometer infrastructure per 100,000, and the percentage mode share of cycling. And we found almost a direct relationship between the availability of safe cycling infrastructure and the mode share of cycling, up to about 25% of the mode share, so 1 out of 4 trips cycling. After that, the relationship broke down. But for me, it shows clearly that you need to have this infrastructure available to get people to cycle. Finally, as what I said at the beginning, I mean, I think health is made in our streets. It's made by our urban planners, our transport planners, but also by other stakeholders like the education sector. I mean, still too many kids are going to school by car. We should take the car away, get them to go walking, cycling, use this space for greening, and also active transportation. And we should make health and well-being the guiding principle for making our changes in our cities. Often people say, oh, it's very difficult. I mean, it's impossible to do, but I quickly want to show you a few examples where this actually happened. Important example is Seoul, where they had a motorway on the left side, which you can see, took it down, put a nice waterway with green space, a smaller road. Düsseldorf in Germany, a very famous example where a big road, even the car-loving Germans gave up their car there, and you got nice blue space and green space. This is in Barcelona. This was also before a big roundabout where all the traffic came into the city, was distributed around the city. They took this down, and now we've got a nice park. Again, I mean, you know, a much nicer environment to be in, with much more green and really to be enjoyed. I think Paris, there's a lot going on. In terms of greening, we see that Anne Hidalgo, the mayor, has been leading this exercise and increased greening. Here we see the in Alderley Hospital in Liverpool. Well, on the left side you see the old hospital, was a children's hospital. On the right side you see the new hospital. But you almost can't see because it's underground. But, you know, they asked the kids, what would you like for the new hospital? And they said more parks. And so they built this new hospital underground partly, and the old hospital became a park. So much more green space. I mentioned before also the car-free neighborhoods in Vauban. Again, I mean, here, very little space or no space for cars, but much more for green space, also a much nicer environment. And I think this is what we should be aiming for. I mean, it's how we get, do our daily trips. I mean, rather by bicycle, cycling, walking, etc., through green space to have a much healthier life, physical and mental. This is one of my favorite streets in Barcelona. If I don't know how many of you have been, is in Rambla de Poblenou. It's a nice pedestrian street, cycling lanes on the side, big trees in there. It's a very pleasant environment in the summer when, normally the streets are very hot because of the hot weather that we have. But here it's a nice, cooler, nice breeze. People live here, there are shops, and it provides a wonderful environment to be. If you want to read a bit more, I've given some of the examples. I published a paper in The Lancet and a video. You can have a look at this with much more, but I think my time is up at the moment. So I would like to thank my colleagues who are preparing a lot of the things that I'm showing. And here we're celebrating a paper that we actually published. So thank you so much. If you want to know more, there's the website of one of my big projects, UBD policy projects, Horizon project, where we look at interventions in cities and try to estimate the health benefits. And you're welcome always to email as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Nieuwenhuizen. I think that was a fantastic presentation. At Whistle Stop, we're always keen to look at the evidence and why do we do something, and then to show that transformation and what is possible. It was fantastic to see some of our network colleagues in terms of Liverpool and Utrecht, part of the Healthy Cities Network, showcasing the work that's done, and of course Barcelona too. I think it's really nice, some of the kind of metrics that you put up, but also a plan to follow it. If that, it's very understandable if you can see 3 trees from your window, if there's 30% cover and you're looking at 300, those are easy to measure and a starting point. And I think you really outlined some of the key drivers, but also the challenges around what, this is the framework in terms of the super blocks. They are renowned in terms of the urban planning in Barcelona. But then how do you put them into practice? But ultimately, what the benefits are, wide ranging for health, for people living in cities. And as we look at the impact of climate and health, and I think that's something that the Groundswell Consortium has been developing, the evidence and showcasing initiatives. So it's really great to have your insight and your expertise in these. I'm going to invite you to stay for the rest of the webinar. We're going to have a Q&A. I see some comments coming in the chat already, but thank you so much for that. And we're going to invite our second speaker today to get ready. Gillian Dick from Glasgow City Council. I'm going to invite you just to prepare your presentation. Gillian is a member of the UK Healthy Cities and Towns Network in Glasgow. We're delighted to have you here. Your work is fascinating, so I can't wait for your presentation. Gillian is the manager of Spatial Planning Research and Development Team within the Development Plan Group at Glasgow City Council, a chartered Royal Town Planner and past chair of the present Partnership and Accreditation Panel. For the past 4 years has been the chair of the Technical University Dublin Partnership Board. We are delighted to have you with us, Gillian. As always, put comments and questions in the chat and go ahead with your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. You can see that presentation just to do that. You can, that's grand. Hi,
Perfect.
Everybody. This is a picture of Glasgow in the sun. I'm going to slide. I'm going to start by saying, as a town planner, town planning came out of health issues. It came out of the cholera epidemic in London, where we used mapping to find out where the water stands were that were infected. So they mapped the disease with the water stands and found where. So planning has always been about health, and our charter is about planning for the public good. It is not about planning for big business. It is not about planning for the economy. It is about planning places for the public good. In Scotland, we've started trying to talk about living well locally. because everybody's got some kind of hang up about 2-minute neighborhood. This is a diagram colleagues up at the university did when they did a guide to how you can enjoy locally. They started to things that you need. You'll see that they have put green space, but in Glasgow, which is very urban, we talk about open space because in Scotland we have to have a statutory open space that covers the grey, the blue, and the green. And the biggest open space in Glasgow is not green, even though we're the Deer Green City. It's the River Clyde, and it's our grey, which is our footpaths, our cycleways, and actually ultimately our roads. And we want to green them, we want to reclaim them for people. So I would recommend what I will do the link to this, the online this document Andy did because it's really useful. Active Currently, some of you in the network may well know, started mapping out what you need to live well locally. What I need to live well locally is different from what my 88-year-old mother needs, and it's different from what my cousin's 5-year-old needs. I am healthy. Walk further, I can feel safer in some places, and I don't mind getting on public transport that might be disconnected to get to a supermarket, and I can get that shopping back. My 88-year-old mother can't drive. She's relying on her free bus pass. She can carry things, and she has been known to go down to Sainsbury's and carry a kilo of potatoes up the road, and I live in the Firth of Clyde, so you've got a raised beach, so she's going uphill. That's not good. This diagram is map out all the kind of things that you need to live well locally. So what do you need daily access to? What do you need to be climate resilient? So you'll see it talks about green energy, net zero, carbon neutral, e-island. What do you need at home to be affordable, safe, sustainable? Access to healthcare facilities, access to the different types of open space, where you go for exercise, and that can be indoors and outdoors, and where you go for learning, where you go for your culture and heritage, where you go for your local shops and facilities, where you go to create sustainable, responsible local supply chains. So can we keep that circular? What your public transport does, and then it goes on and on and on. A lot of this links to community wealth building. A lot of it links to the quality of the spaces we provide. I'm going to take you into a tool that we'll call Glasgow's Environmental Digital. Again, I will give you the, but I'm using it to illustrate some of the contests we have for land. And what I'll say is the funding model that we have in Europe gives you money for it does not give you money for long-term stewardship. So putting more open space in becomes a financial liability either for the local authorities who don't have the budget to maintain it or the skill sets to maintain a changed environment and do not move the budget from the roads maintenance budget to open space, or it becomes a liability for community. And the second point I'll make is if open space and that is mental health or it improves somebody's attainment, or it reduces the need for chronic mental health care interventions, the savings that the health board makes do not get diverted to the thing that saved them the money in the first place. So any savings that a health board makes go back into the health board. So you'll get another nurse, another doctor, another MRI. It does not come to the authority or other public bodies or the community to maintain open space that might have been the one change made the difference that saved the health board money. I'm a planner. I always want to visualize. What we're really aware of is that people can't access GIS, so geographical information systems. People keep putting geography onto spreadsheets, and that doesn't tell you anything. So what we've created is this open source map. Anybody can look at it. This is the landing page. I'm not going to because Glasgow sometimes it's wobble. You come in this map, Glasgow, which you zoom in, and it also brings you in a set of layers. And at the minute, the boundary layer is clicked on this one. You can go up to the top right left-hand corner and just put in an address. You can zoom in, etc. There is also, so it's the green button that I have open at the minute, but if you open the yellow, it will tell you what layers you are looking at. So if I move this on, the canopy covers this. And just looking at Glasgow's got lots of trees. But our canopy cover is between about 10% and 25%. And that canopy cover is at risk because 95,000 risk of dying from ash die. Also a lot of old trees, and there's a lot of trees on vacant and derelict land that are so you need to drill down into the data to get more information. So I've zoomed in on Glasgow Green, the older park in Glasgow. It's in the city centre. It's where the city starts. It's a poor urban area. I never refer to myself as a deal with an area unless you understand in which it sits. Our flood alleviation problems are not dealt with wholly within an urban context. We have to look at the upper reaches of the river and the firth. So I never talk about urbanism because I do. I look at living well locally in an urban context. This map here I have highlighted.
Sorry, Gillian. Your connection is a wee bit in and out, and we're just missing some. I wonder if you turn off your camera, would that
I will certainly turn off my camera.
would it
Let me
make a
just see
difference? I'm not
if
sure.
that's doing that. 2 secs, and I will look to where I can turn that off. So hopefully that will,
Thank you.
apologies. I'll keep going if it wobble.
Thank
Is
you.
put on the canopy cover just to show you that cover works in an urban area. So you can see North Bank and got major redevelopment on the South Bank. Very little vacant land, very little open. So you can see the tree canopy covers as well in the streets. We will get this to move on. What I looked at, just to give you another example, in the same area, the walking distance is just to give you an idea. So if you're walking those streets with cover and you're having to walk your GP, this is the kind of distances that you are travel. And the white areas are areas where people are living more than 15 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes walk from a GP surgery. No information, there's the kind of parameters to show you those distances. So even if you live in Gorbals, you're going to be in an area that's green, doesn't have an awful lot of nature intervention, distance. This is our SMID, so our areas of multiple deprivation, the darker color. I think from memory, the more deprived that you are. You'll see Dalmark is showing up as deprived and other areas. Again, you can layer all this stuff with some of the flooding data, our planning application data, our health data, and start to understand and ask the mapping questions. It's 3D, so I switched the 3D model on here on the same area and put the walk distance to GPs in. So you can see where the buildings are, and it gives you a better idea about the walking distance, that people do actually live in areas where there is a deficit of GP and they are not within of them. Same map, I've taken the GPs off and the designated open space on, and the only layer of that I've switched on there is our split parks and gardens. So there are other open spaces there, but it gives you an idea of where it is. And if you look at the city centre, which is up in the just to the centre north of the site, you'll see there's very little open space in there at all. I've got the information we have on flooding. 10% chance of river flooding, the 0.5 chance of the medium flood, and the likelihood of flooding more, and that is where the streets flood. I focused in on Govan, which is quite a deprived area. It does have some open space, but it's very flat in relation to the river and therefore is subject to flooding. And it may well be communities that can't afford to have insurance to protect them from that flooding. Same off, and it shows you where our industrial land supply is. You can see derelict land sites. It's green. I've just noticed my machine probably my internet unstable again. I apologise. Something in the west of Scotland. But where it shows vacant derelict land with green, those trees, that nature is under threat because that is seen as development land. It may well be old sports pitches. Sports management teams want to sell off so they can get contribution, the better ones. There's the supply in the same area, showing you where we've got an opportunity to build. Some of it may not be in the areas we wish to live. Certainly in a Glasgow context, they don't want to live in our inner urban area, as not areas that they feel comfortable in. They want to live on the outskirts, which doesn't actually sit within Glasgow. And there's all of the vacant and derelict land, and you can see it in the governed area, vacant derelict land, blighting that community. That's shipyards, shipbuilding still there. And so we still have the old industry that was associated with that in that area. Which is one of the states, still left the vacant derelict land on, and you can. This is a state that was built post-war. It's built about 3 times. We're still right. Has multiple health issues in our community, and blight by multiple vacant derelict land around it as well. Again, when you look at the stats, green there, but that space doesn't feel comfortable for our communities. Surrounded by woodland, but they see that woodland is dangerous, dark, they can't see sight lines through it, it's not lit, it's get torched. And then for that, the development site should have open space. Existing open spaces that is at risk from the development, or we're talking about trying to put more development in. Applications in the area, there is a lot, but for that lead actual development, that open space is debatable, because you put planning applications in, and then give the land value. So if you get housing, you can then use that land value to mortgage against development elsewhere. And one of the vacant derelict land sites, you can see what kind of information you come up with, and it also tells applications which we look for more detail on. I've also switched planning applications. You need to know about Drumchapel is that it has a world site running along the Antonine Wall. It's the furthest into the Celtic nations that the Romans got, and they were only here for about 100 years and retreated back to Hadrian's. But we do have that World Heritage Site abutting onto Drumchapel. If you buy a 3-bed house in Drumchapel, and if you go over the Antonine Wall to Bearsden, you're looking at 400. The distance affluence, and Bearsden isn't actually technically in Glasgow and elsewhere, is very, very small. We can look at where the schools are, and we have done a place sufficiency assessment. We've talked to 5,500 young people about where they play in Glasgow. Effectively, they're telling us what it's like. So this is showing you where the schools are, and it's also showing you on a bigger blog, which I think I've got data we've got from John Paul Academy. Click on that, it'll take you into the report that'll tell you exactly what young people in John Paul Academy think about our open spaces. This is schools across the city where we have that data at the moment. We also have data from 500 primary and nursery kids where their teachers took them out to play and asked them where they played and how they played. This home, back into the city centre, and it's telling you where the cycle sites are. So you can again see health data onto that if you wanted to. This is where the cycle racks, where you can park up hire bikes and your own bikes. And this is showing you the bus routes in the area. So there is, with this data, automate questions, you can start to question how these places are working. I've put on the canopy cover again, and on TPO. So where you can see green, it's the canopy cover is. Again, see a limited amount of canopy cover in our city centre and a limited opportunity to put that greening back in. Final bits, points of interest, areas, libraries, and things that might be an opportunity to plant an old tree. But I've just pulled out one of the museums. is understanding the subsurface and knowing what pipes are, because the cables and pipes within the pavement can prevent us from planting more trees. Final wee bit, I think I picked out the city centre to give you an bear in mind that there is two large routes the chemist city centre. This is walking distances, and there is still a gap of getting to pharmacies. I think that is probably my final slide, so I will stop sharing there and hope that I stayed stable enough that that made sense.
It did. It's fantastic, Gillian. I know we had a wee bit of introduction, but I think it was or interruption. I think it was great to have you displaying the digital tool, so we were able to follow what you had captured, what you were trying to say there. But an amazing resource to have to inform planning around, areas of deprivation, current tree cover, but even that insight you can see, I know Scotland has legislation around engagement and the voice of the community in planning, but you can see that coming through the fact that you say, okay, there is developer space, but people wouldn't want to live there because of the woodland and what it means. And that's so important to consider everyone in that whole systems approach, because if you do some fantastic housing development, but it doesn't meet the needs, it's not going to work. So I think that was really came through strongly. Um, and I heard you speak about place efficiency before, and it's so interesting. I think there's a lot that we can learn. So um, the recording will be shared, and also the links that you've mentioned, and some questions coming in the chat for you. So we'll ask you just to stay on to the end if that's okay, and we'll have some question and answers. But thank you so much. Our final speaker of the day, you're very welcome, John Hayes from Cork City Council. So we're very familiar with Cork Healthy Cities, and Councillor Tony Fitzgerald and Denise Cahill, the coordinator there. We've great links with Cork City and the fantastic development and growth in the city, and how people and green and blue spaces is at the heart of all that's doing an active travel. It's really living out some of the policies and the research that we have in place. So we're delighted to be hearing from you today, John. John has served as Cork City Council Coordinator with Cork City Council since 2021, and with 29 years experience at the council. John has worked across multiple departments. He has an in-depth knowledge of the council's operation, and it has been invaluable in his recent role. We're delighted to have you here, John. And if you're happy to go ahead with your presentation, we're excited to hear from you.
I am. Thanks very much, Anne. I'm just trying to make sure that my screen is sharing properly. Yeah. Is my presentation there?
Perfect. That's you.
So very happy to be able to talk to the group today, and very interested in the previous speakers as well. So I'm just going to, I suppose, touch on the experience of Cork City Council in relation to that bit of tactical urbanism in specific parklets in the city centre and in the wider city as well. So let's start with an image of the very first parklet that we installed in the city. And this actually came about as part of the placemaking project. So we would have had a placemaking fund, and we would have had open calls to the general public, to community associations, residents associations, arts associations, anyone to come in with a kind of a project that would animate a part of the city or a neighbourhood, or just deliver for the common good. And one of the projects that was put to us was a parklet, a pocket parklet, taking away a parking space. And it was selected and it was funded. And this was the original. And if anyone remembers the Britvic orange ad, it's really like the original and the best. So this was delivered in the space of 6 months. And that's what it looked like on the day that it had been installed and planted. So the story is, it started with 1 became 7, and 7 became 16. And so funding was provided to us from the National Transport Authority, and they were promoting public transport and trying to get people to get out of the car, which is what we all want as well. So they give us funding in two tranches. So they give us funding for another 6 and then another 10, on the caveat that the parklets were to replace car parking spaces. We had huge interest in both calls. I'd say if we could have funded 30, we'd have easily funded 30. We had 30 different partners that were willing to come on board with our scheme. So the reason that I put this image in place is just as a contrast to, this is what it is, and it looks lovely, but this is what it's designed to be. It's designed to be small little pocket parklet in an area that people will meet and people will use, and that it's bringing greenery, that it's encouraging biodiversity. It's a natural-based solution for capturing water. And this one in particular has become a real kind of social hub for the community in the South Parish, the Douglas Street area. And the lady that's actually standing with the cargo bike is Justine, and she's our parklet partner. So for our programme, what we did was we had the open call, but we required a partner. So again, we were looking for a traders organisation, an individual trader, a residents group, a community group, a neighbourhood group, anyone that was willing to take responsibility for the parklet while it's in situ. So when we say take responsibility for the parklet, we just mean to keep it clean. So just general day-to-day cleaning of the parklet, picking up litter, maintenance of the planting, and additional planting if required. So everyone had to come on board. We needed a partner for all of our parklets. And we got a whole range of people that actually partnered with us. We have the likes of Justine here, who runs her own business. We have neighbourhood associations. We had trader groups. We had people that were members of a library. So we had a whole range of people that came forward as parklet partners. So another key requirement in our parklet program is that it's a public space in a public space. So it had to replace car parking spaces, but it wasn't for the use of the parklet partner alone. It is a public amenity. So anyone that wants to sit or use this parklet is entitled to do so. So we kind of reference the partner piece an awful lot, because what it's doing is it's showing a shared commitment, a commitment from the local authority in the fact that we fund it and we get them built and we get them installed, and a commitment from the partners then that they look after the day-to-day maintenance and, for want of a better term, the well-being of the parklet. I suppose if I was, and I have spoken to others that are thinking about parklets, like obviously we've had learnings. So our first parklet went in 2018. It was a standalone parklet for 2 years, and then with the advent of COVID and the importance of public outdoor space and funding becoming available, the next 6 were delivered between 20 and 21, and then the following 9 were delivered between 21 and 2022. So we have learnings, because I suppose we have 8 years of experience with one parklet, and in general we have 5 to 6 years of experience in the rest of them. The key factor in success is location, location, location. And by that I mean, for the parklet partner, it really does need to sit outside their place of business or their places of activity. It's just that they find it easier to maintain. There's constant passive surveillance on the issue. So if they feel that there's something happening that shouldn't be happening in the parklet, they can just go out and they can sit down, and all of a sudden that activity can stop. We had one parklet which was literally adjacent to the parklet partner, to its business. So they had no direct line of sight. but literally the parklet was in situ from their building line. So it was just below their building line. So you'd be thinking that's very close proximity. But they found it very hard to keep an eye on it and to manage the some unsocial or antisocial activity that resulted there. And in the end, we just had to relocate it because it wasn't viable for the parklet partner themselves. And we had others that were looking for the parklet, so we were able to repurpose it and relocate it. And the other key factor for success as well is the capacity of the partner to actually maintain it. So if you're talking about a business, if the business is operational 5 days a week or 6 days a week and it's open 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, or if there's a daily presence, again, that has featured in the successful parklet partners. If it's a community association or a community group, it really depends on their capacity to be able to keep an eye on the parklet on an ongoing basis. And we've had mixed results with that. So I would say they're the kind of key learnings from if you decided to go down a parklet partner process. Things to be pleasantly surprised about. These are big enough units. They're in prime public space. One of the things that we expected that we would be doing quite often is removing graffiti. And touch wood, in the 8 years we've been doing the parklets, I don't think we've had to remove any graffiti from it. They for some reason, they have just stayed immune to being tagged, which is fantastic to see. I don't know, is it that the people that tag stuff and paint graffiti recognize what the parklet is and what it delivers for the community, but they have been graffiti free. And very little damage, very little structural damage to the parklets at all. When I say here some incidental damage, because they're in actual what were previously parking bays, they're adjacent to the road. We've had some drivers misjudge the width of the parklet and the width of the vehicle they're driving and have shunted one or two parklets, or we've had people that have parked or been parking and have reversed and just clipped our parklets. We have put in bollards to try and prevent that, but unfortunately that hasn't stopped some very bad parking where they've literally knocked the bollard and then went straight into the parklet. But it's been very incidental, and the damage hasn't, nothing was written off, and very low key repairs required. So that's been very.
We seem to have lost John there. We'll see if he can come back on and finish his presentation. But so much value there in what he was saying. I must say to him when he comes back, we visited that actual parklet in Cork, and fascinating, and we'll explore a wee bit further some of kind of the ripple effects of that one intervention. When we unpick it, I mean, if anyone has tried to do a parklet, the fact that the National Transport Authority were funding it to replace car parking, that's fantastic, because that can sometimes be the challenge to say we're going to take away one parking space, but the benefit and that kind of public community private business partnership is a real model to try to replicate elsewhere. So fantastic to see that and the fact that it hasn't been graffitied. So there must be community ownership. There's part of the process is about understanding why it's there and the benefit of it. Which is fantastic to hear. Now, we have plenty of questions in the chat, and we do have the next 30 minutes for question and answer session. So what we might do in the absence of John is start that, if that's okay. So if I could invite Gillian, thank you, and Mark as well back on. You're very welcome. We'll start with some of the questions that have come in. So, I mean, I'm they're not addressed to any one person. I think it's nice just to have a conversation. Mark, I'll address this one to you first, and then Gillian, you can come in. So for yourself, have you anything to say about the effects of our weather on possibilities and uptake? So that was from Nicola Armstrong. So I presume Nicola's referring to the fact that we've had rain for 40 days. Rain is a constant in our climate. And is there, and maybe not rain in Barcelona, but certainly the heat is such an issue. So what is the effect of weather? And additionally to that, I think Adele put in the chat, what about the landscape? So the topography where Adele is from Derry and Strabane, very hilly city, beautiful, but some of the makeup of our weather and our city streets, how does that impact the interventions that you were mentioning?
Well, I think the water, in a way, I'm coming from Barcelona. Normally, we don't have enough water. I mean, we have droughts, and we don't. For a while, the last couple of years, they couldn't plant any new trees or green space because of the limited availability of water. So, in that way, for you there, I mean, having so much water, I guess it's also very green around there. What helps a lot. I think in this way is also what I see in many cities where it's so wet. I mean, often they put a lot of asphalt down, and so you get all this runs off or whatever. And I think green space actually can be used in a very efficient way to capture the water and to put it in places where it doesn't affect us too much as such. Of course, I mean, when it rains, it's not always so pleasant to go outside and enjoy green. But then I grew up in the Netherlands where it was always raining, and we just put on a raincoat and went out. I mean, it was like nothing ever happened. I mean, and I must say also, the last time I was in Glasgow, I was surprised that people just went out walking around.
We always go out.
I know, it was like it was pouring down with rain. I was the only one with an umbrella walking there, and the rest was just went on like nothing happened. I mean,
there is absolutely no point in using a brolly in Scotland or Ireland because the wind comes straight through you and a brolly will last about 5 minutes and blow inside out. Dealing with rain, 1,500 mils a year in Glasgow comes straight across. If it doesn't hit Derry, it hits us. You have to, the philosophy is there's no wrong weather, it's the wrong clothing, and you just have to get out in it. You have to wrap up. The problem we have in some of our more deprived communities is particularly young people only have one coat, one set of shoes, and those shoes and those coat are inappropriate for rainy weather. So there is talk about how do schools provide rain jackets and wellies that can be circulated around to get kids out. And you sometimes see nursery schools where they put kids in effectively waterproof boiler suits so they can get them out. We are trying to deal with the rain. There is a huge issue about how we deal with getting wetter and warmer. That is and does require more nature-based solutions rather than heavy engineered solutions. The issue is the budget hasn't shifted from the heavily engineered solutions to the nature-based solutions yet. So we are getting more rain gardens, but they're like add-ons to cycleways done by transport engineers who know how to engineer things. We still put down tarmac. We don't speak to our communities about how porous and permeable surfaces work, so they don't understand. And we don't have legislation to stop somebody digging up their grass and putting down sets, which is what one of my neighbours has just done at the basement of a flat, and we're 50 metres from the Clyde. So good luck when it pours with heavy rain, because they've now just created a flooding problem. So I think it's a perception, it's a misunderstanding. People don't know what to do with the water and the rain. And even if we do something, if we cannot maintain that intervention, don't have the maintenance money, then we can't solve the problem. So our flood alleviation guys can put trees in and they can kind of capture that in their flood alleviation maintenance money. But if we put more trees in parks, or we put more trees somewhere where the budget is more constrained, it causes an issue. And there is unintended consequences of putting trees in the wrong place that can cause more flooding rather than less. So we've had those debates as well.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think you've got this concept as well for the sponge cities, no, for what's going around. Now, I must say you have the problem perhaps of a lot of rain, for we have the opposite, that it gets very hot here, and
Yeah.
that's actually much more difficult to deal with. And also with the shift in climate, I think, you may experience some of these things as well. Actually, one of my PhD students, she's Scottish, and she always complains that it's way too hot here, even in the winter. And I say it's not so hot yet. But in the summer, when I started here 20 years ago, we had 2 weeks in the summer that were really too hot, that you didn't feel you couldn't do anything, and a lot of things were dying off. Nowadays, it's 2 months per year. I mean that, and
Okay.
this, it's not really great for your body. It really, you can't function anymore with the heat. I mean, I'd rather go to rain. You feel you can function, you can do things, and everything lives. But with the heat, it's another perspective, I think.
It's a perspective on how the weather makes you feel. Anything over 20 degrees is warm for Northern Ireland and Scotland and most
I
of
know that's
Ireland.
what she says here always.
So it's fine. I think too much rain and grey can give people winter blues. And if you are not resilient enough to deal with climatic changes, not resilient enough to be able to get out of your house and go somewhere that still feels comfortable in the rain, then it's going to have a major impact on mental health and well-being. And that's where the issue, regardless of whether it's too hot, too cold, too windy, too wet, in
Yeah.
our more deprived communities, if they are not climate resilient, then we have to do stuff to help them to deal with that. And you were wanting to jump in.
No, I think you just make a really good point, Gillian. Those kind of practical considerations. If someone has one pair of shoes and one coat and it rains for 40 days, how do you make sure that you can go out day after day and your health is protected? And I think that kind of it's one more compound in
Cold,
inequality.
wet feet, cold, wet arms,
Yeah,
cold head because you haven't got a hat on. Apart from feeling miserable, you're more liable to catch things. You're more
yeah,
liable to, and if your house doesn't breathe properly, you're more likely to be living in a moldy house as well.
yeah.
It is an issue.
And I think this is the purpose of this webinar series is to explore temporary and tactical urbanism. So we have the evidence presented very clearly and coming through Groundswell Consortium as well. We have the policy opportunities and we have the interventions that may be put in temporarily, which may be low cost or can test ideas. And how do we continue that conversation at each of our own places? What is our role within that? And how do we ensure then that there are opportunities to learn from what works and what doesn't work? And where budgets shift or where there is an opportunity or it's timely, that the evidence and the interventions are ready to go. Let me continue with our questions. So these are for Cork. Let me see. John, how did the council navigate local concerns about loss of parking? So I touched on that, and certainly that it came from the National Transport Authority was fantastic. We know the evidence shows that more walkable streets typically equal more customers and improved health, but those benefits not might be observed short term. So I can mention just the florist that John mentioned, the parklet at the beginning. The florist, the business that is outside, they maintained it, and you saw the beautiful flowers in the space all year round. They really transformed their whole business around that parklet. It had such a ripple effect. So they have a florist and then a coffee shop. They looked at their business in terms of that kind of climate footprint. Oh, here comes John back, and reimagined all of it. And we can talk a wee bit more. We'll invite John back in when the conversation is there. The next question again was about Cork and the co-designs. So two questions from a consultant in public realm and environment improvement schemes. Cross-departmental value and accountability. How can we capture and share the benefits and responsibilities of public realm and environmental projects across multiple departments so that health, social care, environment, safety teams can all see how they contribute and what they're accountable for during design, construction, handover, maintenance. So those are around budgets as about shared responsibility, accountability, whole systems approach. Any advice on that? How do we ensure when an issue benefits and should cost across multiple departments? How do we keep going that accountability and maintenance and design?
I can kind of come in on a bit of that. It's sometimes you can't go across the budget. So in local authorities, even if we talk about being holistic and collaborative, budget becomes siloed. This is my budget and I'm going to spend it on maintaining this park. This is my budget, I'm going to spend it on building this road. This is my budget for cycling. And the budget streams that come from national government have focuses. So sometimes we refer to them as zombie projects. You might have a brilliant holistic project, but you have to chop off all the best bits to get the funding stream to work.
Okay.
And we haven't sorted out the funding to look at who pays for maintenance, who benefits and who pays is completely disconnected. So we can have lots of lovely researchers like Mark telling us it's a benefit to health, it's a benefit to this, there's multiple benefits all over the place. But until governments start forcing the budget holders to look at those benefits and put a weight to those benefits and put that money, the benefits are only felt by a budget saving to a health board or a budget saving to the education authority. And they don't give that to whoever's created the open space, whoever's dealt with the sustainable urban drainage to maintain it, whoever's put the trees in that have had that unexpected. We knew it was going to happen, but they didn't. So there is a disconnect between who pays and who benefits. And it's still very much there, particularly when you're looking at long-term maintenance of keeping something in situ.
And then something around social value. It often features in business cases. We do talk about it a lot, but evaluation usually falls to ICT consultants or limited reporting. So how can we streamline evaluation so it keeps pace and informs decision making?
I can jump on that one as well if you want, because somebody's put, Aoife's put in the chat how often we keep the data. The data we've got in that open source model, and I have put the link in, I think it's the hosts and panelists chat, so I'm sure it'll be shared around with you. We've gathered the open source data that we've got for Glasgow, which you could find if you know where to look, and we've put it in a dashboard that anybody can use. That data is live streamed from Glasgow City Council. So as we update the planning applications, that planning application layer will update. If we get more data about pharmacies going in, that'll update. So we're trying to keep it up to date because it just pulls the live data from the live data sources that we've got. We think the
So
2D and 3D,
access.
it's open access.
Anyone can use
anybody
it,
can use it, play with it.
Like,
Paris has got something similar. They've just called it their environmental model, and London's got very similar. And we used the fact that those two cities had it to say we need to build this. We also use the fact that people still don't understand GIS. They still think it's a fancy drawing tool, and there's limited access within councils to say, if this is open source, let's dump the whole damn lot on a dashboard so that everybody can use it without the excuse of not having access to GIS. So please play with it. My only advice is don't load everything up at once. Copy it, plagiarize it, create the Derry version of it, the Cork version of it. Come and talk to us about how we did it if you want to. But yeah, it is influencing. So we use that in meetings. I'll switch it on as people ask questions, and I'll switch the layers on. So our people were saying, well, how much tree cover is there on vacant derelict land? Now, we have run a dashboard in the past, but I switched on the vacant derelict land layer and the tree cover data and zoomed in the area they were at and said, well, those 3 vacant derelict land sites have got trees on. Don't know what quality they are at the minute, but they're either under threat because you want to develop that site, or they are an opportunity to be kept. And it allows those conversations visuals. If you did it on a spreadsheet, you wouldn't be telling the story.
Yes, I know, and to have that at hand. And so Ruth Hunter asks, said there's a big pressure on tactical urbanism, particularly during COVID. Have we learnt any lessons from that, or any interventions still in place from that time that have become permanent? Mark or Gillian? I'll invite John. I don't know if he is
Yeah,
on.
I can. I was just going to say, can you hear me?
I can hear you, John. How are you?
I did not realize that I had dropped out of the call, so I went
Sorry.
to the very bitter end with my presentation. Whereabouts did I fall off, guys? Just so.
I could tell you the slide. Where were we? We were at graffiti.
Oh yeah, no, look, and I'm not going to go too long now. I was just saying that actually they were very resilient. They didn't get hit by graffiti, which was
Yeah.
very unexpected. Very little damage from an antisocial perspective. So just to sum up, I won't spend 5 minutes going through the last couple of things. The key learnings are make sure they're modular because you will have to move them.
Okay.
Make sure you have resilience in place in your own organization to be able to support them from a maintenance perspective, because you will have a churn in partners. And again, it leads back to the earlier discussion there about budget, because all of a sudden it becomes what section is responsible for it, because it came from a certain funding from, like, if it comes from the NTA, well, that's a road section, but is it the parks? So you need to have that kind of built in yourself beforehand, that look, someday someone is going to have to go out and do something, and be very conscious of the materials, because that silver larch has not aged well. It's too wet a climate here in Ireland. So ideally, you mightn't like to go down the road of composite recycled plastic, but it is something we would consider, because we just think that the lifespan would be longer, and you'd be offsetting it by getting as much planting as you could into it. And from a maintenance point of view as well, like, we have to treat the wood. So when you're treating wood, you're bringing other product, which isn't great. So there's a lot of considerations.
John, I'll follow up. So some people have been asking, naturally, that fear around losing a parking space. It was great to have the NTA supporting funding that initially, because they were on board with that. But what about local backlash? Was there any challenges, or can we discuss the challenges around that?
Yeah, there were. In the city centre, it was retailers, because potentially you're losing space where either people that are delivering goods, or maybe even shoppers, are coming in. But it was just a conversation, and what was good was usually it was a business that was looking for a parklet outside it.
Okay.
So you actually had a business saying, well, we think this is actually going to bring more people to the area. They're going to be sitting down having a coffee, and they're actually going to be looking around, and they're going to see your shop window, and they say, we'll wander in there.
Okay.
And once they were in situ, we never heard again really from anyone complaining that there were lost car parking spaces. And out in the suburbs, we've had one or two where there would have been some residential parking. So there was a bit more resistance there. We picked our battles. We went with one. I suppose we went with one that was probably a bit harder than the others. And again, we've never had a complaint from the loss of parking perspective. The only complaint we might have had is if there's a bit of noise just from the use of the parklet.
Yeah. And the fact that they were temporary initially, does that make it easier to say we're testing this?
Yeah,
we're open to feedback?
It is, and that's what I was at the end of the thing as well. I was saying having that exit strategy as well.
Yeah.
We're lucky that the first one has been so successful, and the other ones. But sometimes actually, what you need an exit strategy, you need to say it's only going in for 18 months or 2 years to prove that it can work. But what you're hoping, as I said, I don't know if you heard it, is that when you remove it, people will be saying, why did you take the parklet away? It was lovely. Bring it back.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes actually by taking it away, you're actually proving your case, because the kickback will be louder saying, that was lovely, you can't take it away. And you say, well, sorry, no, we said we were doing it. You take it away, and then you say, we can consider putting in even something a bit more permanent.
Very good. So I just wanted to touch on lightly kind of that ripple effect of a small intervention like a parklet. I know a lot goes into planning and the funding and the space allocation and everything and the partners that will maintain it. But we actually visited that florist, and it was fantastic to hear their story, how they had used the parklet as almost an impetus for reviewing their whole business around their climate impact. I saw the cargo bike in the picture for deliveries, and they removed all plastic from their florist and also the disposable cups in their coffee shop. And is that something that your experience would be? This is kind of the trigger for wider kind of acknowledgement around the impact of climate or active travel, or
yeah, well, we try and use that as the demonstrator that it can lead to it. But I suppose, like, if you have a community group or residents association, they're already probably on that path anyway, so there's no convincing at all.
okay.
Some of the other businesses, well, actually, what we've seen with some of the other businesses is they've kind of collaborated with creatives, or people start coming there and meeting outside there, and they're meeting with the kind of creative cultural sector, which is leading to other initiatives happening in the area and maybe some other animation. So that's kind of been our experience in relation to, as I said, that one is an exemplar. In fairness,
It is.
Justine
It
just
is.
does such a fabulous job. And as I said, there's no convincing residents or community associations. They're already well invested, and they know the value of greening and the environment and open space and taking traffic away and taking a bit of noise away. So
And it's an
that is,
enabler, for
yeah.
everything else that you want to do. It enables that kind of first step as well. Was there any consideration around behavioral change or behavioral science in any of the work that anyone has demonstrated? Do visible improvements in walkability, greenery, and comfort generally motivate people to choose active transport? I think that we've actually just answered that question, but if anyone wants to say anything about that.
There's a little bit, cause and effect is really difficult to capture. We've had conversations where, because the health professionals are more in the research community and want a clear cause and effect, and we've said as social scientists, as planners, if we know when an intervention went in, we can almost use that to say, well, we know the stats before and we know the stats afterwards. And what John's described, you could do cause and effect of stats before, parklet went in, stats afterwards, we took the parklet away, stats afterwards, plus the human voice. And I think for us, a lot of it is capturing the lived experience. So we have a project in Glasgow called Every Tree Tells a Story, where we're getting people to write postcards to trees, inspired by Melbourne. I'll put the link in the chat again. We've got over 500 postcards, but we've managed to get the Art College, Strathclyde Uni, Glasgow Uni involved. If anybody else wants to join, Anne, if you want to kind of tag in from Belfast, please do. We've got an actor involved, we've got a poet involved. We're doing open source again, so anybody can use the materials, but Strathclyde is archiving, but it gives us that lived experience. And we've heard stories about people who are going and sitting beside a tree because it reminds them of their tree in Palestine or Australia or South America, and it connects them with home. We've got people who are grounded because that's the tree that they sat under with their grandparents. It's where they learned to ride a bike. It's where they carved their name, all of that kind of stuff. Same thing that Melbourne found. And I think sometimes you have to capture that lived experience story, because just counting things, the 3 by 30 by 300 is great, but 3 trees that are dying is not 3 trees that you're happy to see. A 30% canopy cover is not great if 90% of those trees are about to die in the next 5 years from ash dieback or elm disease or whatever, and you're only going to see saplings. And being within 300 meters of a failing park is not good for anybody. So you need the quality data as well as the quantity.
And I think that is a thread that goes through everything. If we look at, Mark put up a cycling infrastructure in Utrecht is a huge thing to enabling people to cycle in every weather, and also, not just the brave all ages and descriptions. Mark, there's a question, how does greening contribute to climate mitigation? Has any modelling been done on the carbon uptake of green spaces in cities? I'll put that to you, but everyone is invited to contribute.
To be honest, not so much, I think. This is partly because the surface, it's normally a small area. I mean, it's not so big. I mean, you've got much more space outside cities, of course. I mean, so I think it's more the adaptation what actually counts. Just one comment. I mean, I'm thinking, because what I hear before is also about the budgets or whatever. And, I'm a researcher. I mean, that I come from the outside, and what I see too often, exactly was mentioned before, this kind of silo thinking. And then I think what is an important person that brings things together is the mayor. And, you mentioned Utrecht. I mean, this is a very successful example. I mean, I think the same political party has been in charge for 20 years or so. They've had time to build up what they want to do. And, you see clear leadership. They also work, I think, with teams, with different people where they come together to decide what's going to happen. And so I think, the mayor, I mean, he or she needs to put the different departments together, and perhaps at times doesn't happen enough, or determines what they want. I mean, also Paris, I mean, it's got a great mayor, clear vision. Then I look here in Barcelona. Before we had a mayor who was very good. We had the super blocks, and now we got a new mayor, and he doesn't want to know about the super blocks. And they stop from 1 minute to the next, and then the rest of the council kind of follows. So I think this political leadership is also so important, based on my own experience, and I think we see it also in many other places. But I think also the mayor could do a bit more to break down the silos and budgets within city councils.
It's worth jumping in and saying, Mark, if you look at the situation in Scotland in a minute, we're about to go into the purdah for elections for the devolved government this May. That could fundamentally change the direction of travel, because there's a real fear we're going to swing to the right. And I'll say that and treat this as shame. And there is a fight on to make sure that we don't, because that could just blow the whole planning and health system out the water. And then we've got another year, and every single council is up for election as well. They're on a 5-year stream. They maybe concentrate for 3 years going hard, and then 2 years is about getting re-elected. But we've got a wobble because some of our councillors will be looking to get elected into Parliament. So that will then wobble the councils for the next year as well. And whilst we're told to plan long term, you can't, because budgets are set year on year, and political direction of travel changes every 5 years, or for some communities every 3 years or every 4 years, depending on the election cycle. And unless we can we need a democratic society, but we need some stability in the policies in the long term, because this reactive policy making doesn't help any communities.
No. That's my point as well. I mean, that's what we see here in Barcelona. I mean, it's a real shame. I mean, that, but often people also don't realize what they vote for in the local elections. It tends to be also more what's happening nationally and how much it affects their local circumstances. I think really what's happening in the street, and I think there's this not always that awareness. I mean, that how these kind of very local things are connected to what they vote for. And I think this is also missing. And I see this kind of influence of the mayor, the few politicians around it, that's in a way too strong, the very short-term thinking, while we need, is what you say, long-term thinking. I mean, that...
I think examples of that, or maybe the well-being, are the indicators that the Welsh government work to. But also the Healthy Cities Network. I think that is the key uniqueness of it, that political leadership and also technical or city health and well-being planning, public health network that exists. And across the UK, there will be different power structures. So certainly in Northern Ireland, the mayor would not have the powers that other local authorities across the UK have. In Ireland, Limerick was the first directly elected mayor, but also then in across the different city and county councils, there would be different priorities as well. So there are opportunities to, share and learn and see if we're all going in the same direction and how we get there. What I would ask the three of you, there was a comment in, if you were to pick one intervention, what would it be? To kind of look at greening, temporary, tactical urbanism. If there was one final comment that you were going to leave us with, John, I'll invite you to put forward yours.
I suppose like my only experience really has been the parklets. I think I do think there is value in the parklets. I do think doing it on a set time frame, in and out. I think that really can give you a kind of a mandate to do more greening, because if the feedback when you take it out is strong, you have that mandate that you can take elsewhere.
Fantastic. And I think they're small but mighty. They're an intervention that you can use, that could be time bound, but then the positive benefits around it that you see are fantastic. And thank you for sharing your experience on that. Gillian?
I would kind of say it's about the continuous conversations with the community. We do a lot of consultation where we go in and go back out again. We've had to fight on the police sufficiency assessment because everybody thought it was a one and done, and trying to say to them that if we talk to an 8-year-old now, their opinion is going to change by the time they were 10, let alone when they were 12 or 18, and that we needed to keep talking to them. And I would say, to back up John, although he is here, he's taken one of his things out. We did stalled spaces in Glasgow, and it's about the resilience. So if you want those to survive as a legacy, you have to make the community resilient enough to look after it themselves and not be reliant on the original funder. And we need different funding streams that do not just planning and delivery, but stewardship. And to remember that the stewardship's in an infinity loop, that if you steward and look after something well, then you may not need so much planning and delivery funding going forward. If we continue to look at things linear, then we're going to continue with the same problems that we've got at the minute.
That's lovely. Thank you, Gillian. Mark?
I'm perhaps a bit biased. I'm coming back to the Barcelona superblocks because it addresses so many of our problems that we have in our cities. I mean, that as I explained what the superblock is, I mean, it's what I said before, but also to green space, it reduces noise levels and air pollution levels. I mean, reduces heat island effects. It addresses many different things. Brings back more social capital, and whatever you think of. And at the same time, it reduces car use within the city. And unfortunately, I think many of our cities are still too car dominated. I mean, that's, and I think we should try to reduce that. And so this is why I would go for that. I know it's very difficult to implement. You need to have a lot of courage, and you need to have quite a lot of funding actually to do this as well. But actually, when it's implemented, or what I've seen here in Barcelona, places where it's been done, it's great.
I totally agree. And the fact that you could say how many preventable deaths per year that investment would go against. So there are savings, but it's how you unpick who owns what and what budgets and accountability. But thank you so much to Gillian Dick, John Hayes, and Mark Neuenhuizen for your presentations today. It was fantastic. I will just share the slide for the next webinar in the series, and I've lost my screen. The registration link will be sent to you. So there we go. You're very welcome today, and thank you for joining us. And you'll see there is the link. It'll be shared in the chat as well. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and are inspired by all of the work that's taken place, the research, the evidence, the temporary interventions, and take that forward in your work. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you at the next event. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.